মা বাবার আশীর্বাদ মাথায় নিয়ে আর রবীন্দ্রনাথের হাত ধরে মোক্ষা টক্সের জার্নিটা শুরু করছি। আজকে ফার্স্ট এপিসোড, আপনারা জানেন এটা রক্তকরবী নিয়ে হবে। We are going to talk about the play and then playing with the metaphors. Roktokorobi, this is the 100th year, 1923 এটা লেখা শুরু হয়েছিল 1924 যদিও এটা printed হয়. So between 1923 and 1924 we saw the play being conceptualized and then completed. The story goes that Tagore was motivated by the image of a red oleander plant crushed by pieces of discarded iron that he had come across while walking. Some days later, an oleander branch with a single red flower protruded through the debris as if created from the blood of its cruelly pierced breast. It has been suggested that the play's title might have been more appropriately translated as Bloody Red or Blood Red Oleanders to indicate the association of the flowers with beauty and death. The writing process was complex. I believe it took about 10 drafts, and the name was changed several times. First it was called Roktokorobi, then Nandini, and finally it was revised to Roktokorobi. I'm sure most of you or all of you are familiar with the story of Roktokorobi, and but I will still give you a gist for just in case you have not read it or maybe you've forgotten bits of it. So I'm going to give it to you in very brief. The king of Roktokorobi lives by exploitation of the citizenry. He has an insatiable greed for money. The laborers or tunnel diggers of the gold mine get burnt in the fire of greed. In the eyes of the king, these men are not human beings. They are mere tools for acquiring gold. Therefore, humanism and humanity have been juxtaposed and explored. Nandini loves Ranjan, who is the spirit of ultimate joy and delight. Like her, he is antagonistic to the bond of machine because machines de-link love from life. But before the revolt against mechanization can begin, before the flagstaff of oppression can be ripped apart, Ranjan has to be sacrificed at the altar of mechanization. But the spirit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness now passes from him to Nandini, who now becomes the leader, along with the king who has had his moment of epiphany, that the essence of his life lies in destruction, the destruction that has come before creation. Nandini agrees to be his companion to fulfill Ranjan's dream in the great deal of breaking that needs to be done, and to fight against all the evil that has been accumulated, before harmony can be restored and life and love can triumph once more. Along with the king, Nandini too embraces death, for only death can bring freedom. I'm going to speak to two subject experts, and I am deeply, deeply grateful to them for agreeing to do this with me. I have over here Nandini Mukherjee. Yes, she's Nandini, ironically enough, though she claims that she's not as feisty as the Nandini that we are reading about.
Which is latently feisty. So that's okay.
Yeah. So she has been senior principal of Calcutta International School and the dean of students in Garden High International School. And I've had the privilege of working with her in both these institutions. But to me, she is one of the most wonderful teachers of English language and literature. And her erudition just leaves me awestruck. I do not wish to go back to classroom teaching ever again, but I do wish to go back to that staff room and sit and have a literary conversation with Nandini, because when she talks, it's like listening to someone writing poetry or reciting poetry. And it used to be so enriching. I would come back home feeling so good with myself and feeling so happy because I've had a conversation with her about some text that I was going to teach. Roktokorobi is one of the texts that she had studied during her master's classes, and I think both she and Progya Paramita, who's also sitting here with us today, they taught that to the first batch of IB students in Calcutta International School. So they know the play inside out. Sujoy Prosod Chatterjee really needs no introduction, especially in Kolkata, now even outside. He is an interdisciplinary artist, reinvents himself almost on an everyday basis, always thinks out of the box, and has done some exceedingly interesting work, even with Roktokorobi. We will come to that towards the second half of our talk today. Let me go into the talk. I would like to ask Sujoy first. In my gist, I mentioned Ranjan, Nandini, and the king. Would you briefly want to talk about the other characters who are also very important to the play?
Yes, Roktokorobi, has characters like Bishupagol, Kishore, Udhapak, the professor, Chandra, the woman leader, and of course, visibly and invisibly the Kodaikars or the gold diggers. For me, the king manifests himself in different characters. So there's a bit of king in Nandini also, and there's a bit of Nandini in the king also. So most of these characters that we see, except for Udhapak, who's a professor, are intertwined in Nandini in some way or the other.
Okay.
What is, of course, relevant for today's discussion is, yes, the discussion is going to focus mostly around Nandini today, because Nandini kind of epitomizes all the characters that kind of meander towards her or revolve around her. But essentially, all these characters build up the play and the crescendo of the play.
And contribute to the layers, I'm guessing.
Oh, yes, of course. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Nandini, the last line of my gist said, along with the king, Nandini too embraces death, for only death can bring freedom. Can we look at this concept of death bringing in freedom?
Yes, of course, because basically the red oleanders, as you read out, the blood red oleanders, becomes a dual symbol of beauty and love and decay. And death is essential in this play because it is through death that liberation comes. In the sense that Ranjan has to die in order for Nandini to become a leader. So Ranjan has to die. In a way, metaphorically, the king who has his epiphany also dies in that role of the king and breaks out as something else. And he asks Nandini, there are lines where, he asks her that and I'm just briefly translating, to fight me, you have to hold my hand, and together we shall break things. So this whole, apocalypse of breaking and ruination in order to bring about a new world, a new emerging world, is because, as you said, that, Nandini does symbolize death and freedom as well.
The question is very relevant because death itself,
is freedom.
Nandini, you would agree that in the larger context of literature, be it a Lorca poem by Lorca,
yes,
or the philosophy of John Keats, death has even Rabindranath in অত চুপি চুপি কেন কথা কম ওগো মরণ আমার মরণ
আর তোমার ওই লাইনটা মরণ আমার জীবন তরিবায়
So he in fact
death and life
kind of reinvented death in ডিফারেন্ট ওয়েজ। চিঠিগুলো পড়লেও তো বোঝা যায় যে যেখানে ওই মীরাকে চিঠি লিখছেন বা সমীন্দ্রনাথের মৃত্যুর পর যে লেখাগুলো লিখছেন,
এবং আজ জ্যোৎস্না রাতে ওই ধরনের একটা সেলিব্রেশন comes out of his realization of death.
কিন্তু আজ জ্যোৎস্না রাতে has a completely different context. আসলে we need to demystify that as well. আজ জ্যোৎস্না রাতে কিন্তু সমীন্দ্রনাথের মৃত্যুর পর লেখা হয়নি, এটা মানে সমীন্দ্রনাথের মৃত্যুর জন্য লেখা হয়নি বা শোক থেকে লেখা হয়নি, অথচ নন্দিনীদি ওর লিপিকার লেখাগুলো which is very interesting in literature because এরকম ধরনের প্রোজ আমরা বাংলা সাহিত্যে আগে পাইনি, যেখানে রবীন্দ্রনাথ নিজে বলছেন লিপিকা লিখতে গিয়ে he didn't know, I mean, in the preface itself, that he was writing poetry essentially. So লিপিকার লেখা বা শান্তিনিকেতন প্রবন্ধমালাতেও আমরা দেখতে পাই যে অবধারিতভাবে এই যে মৃত্যু বারবার বিপ্লবের সূচনা করেছে এবং মৃত্যু নতুন জীবনকে সংকেত দিয়েছে, যে বলছেন যে জীবন মৃত্যু পায়ের বৃত্ত, সেটা ইজ ভেরি ইন্টারেস্টিং। অ্যান্ড দ্য ডেথ অফ রঞ্জন অ্যান্ড নন্দিনী together brings in a new era rather than just a new world, which is of course a different political discourse.
Everything, the flagstaff breaks, the flag is ripped apart, and everything is broken, and even the miners say যে আমরা সব কিন্তু ভেঙে দিচ্ছি, and the Raja says হ্যাঁ এই ভাঙার খেলাতেই তো আমরা নেমেছি। So
কত বড় কথা, ভাঙার খেলা,
ওটা অনেক, মানে আমি প্যারাফ্রেজ করলাম,
সত্যি তাই।
তো
আচ্ছা একটু
বলি,
হ্যাঁ শিওর
বলো।
না, আমি যেটা একটা ছোট্ট জিনিস পড়তেও চাই, যেটা আমার মনে হয় আমাদের সকলকে মানে খুব পরিষ্কার করে বুঝিয়ে দেবে, in Tagore's own words, so nobody can be better, that definitely Tagore, writing in 1923, he did want this play to become a kind of social manifesto with polarities of capitalism, labor, and the structure of the revolution. If you look at thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, where the synthesis leads to the revolution, to the bhangar khala, mora bachar khala, bhangar khala. So, and he was very aware of it, and having returned from Europe, he was very, very disillusioned with the pursuit of materialism in a Europe where war was about to break out, but yet the blind pursuit of materialism. And there were many things on his mind actually when he wrote the play. And I was reading this book, after which I'll read out what Tagore himself wrote. Rama Kundu, Professor Rama Kundu, in the introduction to her book on Tagore's Red Oleanders, traces many psychological upheavals in Tagore at that time. First of all, money problems at Vishwabharati, Shantiniketan. Secondly, the tremendous demands that were made, after the Nobel and everything, the tremendous demands that were made by the world and by his country on him, on his presence, and also, of course, the independence movement, the British, the colonialism, the hostility within the country. But what I found interesting while reading this essay was that Professor Kundu writes that, and I'm quoting from her, it was around this time that a little girl drifted into his life. Her name was Ranu. She came like a fresh wind amidst the suffocating climate around. So, of course, it's a reference to Lady Nandini Mukherjee, who joined Shantiniketan when she was about 10 years old, and Tagore was in his 60s, or early 60s, I think, at that time. So, this connection, though Nandini is, of course, much older than Ranu, but again, she's kind of ageless as well, but she's a young woman. But at least Professor Kundu finds this biographical connection, which this is something which I wanted to share. And the other thing, and of course I'm going to read out just excerpts. When রক্তকরবীর অনুবাদ রেড অলিয়ান্ডার্স বিলাতে প্রচারিত হইলে উহার নানা সমালোচনা হয়। তা উনি ম্যানচেস্টার গার্ডেনে তার উত্তর একটা লেখেন, যেটা পরবর্তীকালে বিশ্বভারতী পটলিতে প্রকাশিত হয়। So I'm just reading out excerpts. Some few criticisms of my red oleanders that have appeared in English papers have convinced me that to a considerable portion of my readers in England, this play of mine seems obscure in meaning. But I think, in justice to myself, I should make it clear that it has a definite meaning which can legitimately claim literary expression. There was a time when, in the human world, most of our important dealings with our fellow beings were personal dealings, and the professional element in society was never hugely disproportionate to the normal constitution of its life. Therefore, the interactions of human relationships have so long occupied the most important position. Today, another factor has made itself immensely evident in shaping and guiding human destiny.
Absolutely.
It is a spirit of organization, which is not social in character, but utilitarian. Christian Europe no longer depends upon Christ for her peace, but upon the League of Nations. But the personal man is not dead, only dominated by the organized man. The world has become the world of Jack and Giant, the giant who is not a gigantic man, but a multitude of men turned into a gigantic system. I'm not competent to say how Europe herself feels about this phenomenon produced by her science. But I can say, on behalf of inarticulate Asia, what a terrible reality for us is the West, whose relation to ourselves is so little human. The view that we can get of her in our mutual dealings is that of a titanic power, with an endless curiosity to analyze and know, but without sympathy to understand, with numberless arms to coerce and acquire, but no serenity of soul to realize and enjoy. It is an organized passion of greed that is stalking abroad in the name of European civilization. Such an objectified passion lacks the true majesty of human nature. It only assumes a terrifying bigness, its physiognomy blurred through its cover of an intricate network, the scientific system. It barricades itself against all direct human touch with barriers of race, pride, and prestige of power. Once our people had either an Akbar or an Aurangzeb to deal with. Now we have organized avarice, frightfully simple in its purpose, mechanically complicated in its process. Its messengers who come to us, be they Lord Birkenhead or Lord Curzon, are never for us our fellow beings in flesh and blood. They are abstractions at once far and near, and therefore awful. They are obscure to us in the dark secrecy of their political laboratory, and yet grimly concrete in their grasp upon our vitals. Therefore, it should cause no surprise to anybody if a poet gives a prominent place among the dramatis personae of his play to an apparition which now so powerfully occupies the imagination of a vast world consisting of non-Western races. It is not an individual, but a doom. It's intensely real. Its hot breath is upon us. Its touch is all over our shrinking soul. It's the principal hero today in the drama of human history, and I trust I have the right to invoke it in my own play, not in the spirit of a politician, but of a poet, possibly a lyrical poet. I'm glad to find that my critics readily acknowledge that Nandini, the heroine of the play, has definite features of an individual person. She's not an abstraction, but is pursued by an abstraction like one tormented by a ghost. And this is the drama. Nandini is a real woman who knows that wealth and power are Maya and that the highest expression of life is in love, which she manifests in display in her love for Ranjan. I can assure my readers that I never meant to use this book as propaganda. It is a vision that has come to me in the darkest hour of dismay. I have a stronger faith in the simple personality of man than in the prolific brood of machinery that wants to crowd it out. This personality, the divine essence of the infinite in the vessel of the finite, has its last treasure house in woman's heart. Her pervading influence will someday restore the human to the desolated world of man. And through the sheer power of love, will rescue this world from the dominance of the unholy spirit of rapacity. The joy of this faith has inspired me to pour all my heart into painting against a background of black shadows the portrait of Nandini as the bearer of the message of reality, the savior through death. Vishwabharati Quarterly.
It's a 1925 edition.
1925.
Yeah.
So I think Tagore gives us the whole essence of what he wrote and why he wrote it in very, very clear terms.
And also, in fact, when good that you read out this portion. It gives me a chance to skip through this because I was supposed to add it to my monologue, Nandini. Thank you very much for that. Also, it explains why a lot of theatre directors all across the world have deconstructed the play. I clearly remember I was in Cairo. I was performing at the invitation of the Indian High Commission and, of course, in Egypt. And I remember after our show, I met a woman who possibly speaks only Arabic. And I don't know the language so well. There was an interpreter between us. And she told me she's 72 years old and she still does a solo on Nandini. And I asked her why. The only answer that she gave me, reply that came across is this: I found my freedom in her. Well, let's not forget the social conditions in that country. You know, I mean, there is so much more than just hijab and oppression. But I mean, look at even this is very important for me, that when you said that Rabindranath kind of in defiance to criticism says that my play is obscure.
Yes.
I mean, if Waiting for Godot is obscure, Roktokorobi is obscure. I mean, it is very much left to interpretation, and art, if it's deconstructed at all, leaves the room for interpretation. And Nandini all across the world today. In fact, this little speech that that's written in the 1925 edition of the Vishwabharati Quarterly is also a testimonial to the political vision of Rabindranath in a big way.
Absolutely.
In a very, very big way.
That's why I said it's a social manifesto.
Yeah, and he explained it very clearly. And somewhere throughout the reading that you just did, maybe we can, of course, discuss that on a different forum. Nandini, he mentions, he's a real person.
Yes.
So
Not abstract.
Just not. He doesn't hint at the gender only.
Absolutely.
So
yes.
so the genderlessness of Nandini is evokes a kind of timeless identity that Nandini probably has been seeking through the play.
If I may,
yeah.
Please.
This play was written before the Second World War, naturally.
Yes, yes.
So that becomes a kind of foreboding, isn't it? That reminder of the
Yes,
autocratic.
because the Industrial Revolution had already taken
Happened,
place
yeah.
and it had reached
And therefore
its
the
peak.
mechanization.
And so the mechanization, and slowly around 1923, I don't recall the dates of the Spanish Civil War, but slowly this rise of fascism and
All that
moving
was happening.
that it's slowly building up, because I think I don't know if my dates are right, only sure you would be able to help me. But it was around the 30s, I think, that Hitler's, party was gradually
started
becoming
to rise.
active and rise.
After
After the First World War,
Yeah,
yes.
League of Nations.
League of Nations, yes.
So after the First World War, yeah.
And after the First World War, most of the heroines of Rabindranath had undergone a transition,
Absolutely.
complete transition. Look at Urmimala of Duibon, the two sisters. I mean, who knew that Tagore's a heroine of Rabindranath's literature goes to Presidency College and attends lectures of physics, goes to races, has so much fun rather than brooding for an ugly husband. So
Okay,
yeah.
can we now talk about
No,
the play?
I was hinting at Maluncho. So yeah.
I had a question. Not
Yeah,
a question,
sure.
a kind of an intertextual
Reference.
reference. Not even a reference. We could talk about it.
Yeah, sure.
Struck me. See, when he won the Nobel Prize, and then after that, such a lot of expectation from him, from the Western audience. Well, this kind of reminds me of something that Einstein said to Oppenheimer. Now you have
Correct.
you have to wear the crown of thorns now. Now
Correct.
they've given it
Correct.
to you.
Yes.
If you look at the book Oppenheimer, right? I mean, not the movie as such. Even the movie, the scene near the pool
Yeah.
where Einstein is looking intently, doesn't look at
Oppenheimer at all.
Oppenheimer at all, and he says it. Ultimately, you have to wear that. They'll give you prizes and they'll shower you with decorations. But then, what do you do with it?
Yeah.
You have unleashed whatever you had to unleash on the world.
Correct.
The post-colonial interpretation, or let us say the post-colonial reaction, Tagore's lashing back in a very beautiful way, whatever he says, that I did not create Nandini as I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, she's not, it's very
not a-
interesting that there is obscurity in her, yet she's not an abstraction. She's a real woman.
She's a real woman.
She's a woman.
And I think this entire concept of him having to bear that burden and Oppenheimer having to bear that burden kind of somehow links. And also another thing, would you in any way, three of you, look at Nandini and Draupadi of Mahabharata or Draupadi of Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni's Palace of Illusions in any similar light? I mean, would you, as characters, and not thinking of Draupadi
In
as,
terms of strength, maybe?
Strength, yes, but I remember Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni's book, which I enjoyed very much. But overall, I don't know, this
it's
is
just a
Draupadi,
discussion.
Draupadi, in spite of all that she tries to do, she remains a victim to a certain extent.
And Draupadi had vengeance. Nandini did not have vengeance.
Yes, she did not have, when Ranjan dies, and I have those lines, very beautiful lines. She says, Ami or Bahun hobo. Ami ekhon Bahun. And Tagore gives us a definite, very clear message of, I think, a very positive thought that the revolution takes place and it's successful. Jab bhangte, all the evil and the greed and the power and all that, এগুলো সব ভাঙলো, রাজার কিন্তু এপিফানি হলো, রাজা বুঝতে পারলেন যে উনি কোথাও ভুল, and he came out of that, because he could have যেরকম কিশোরকে লুপ্ত করে দিল। হ্যাঁ, রঞ্জনের মৃত্যুটাও মানে বললেন যে ও কেমন করে যেন তোমার নামটা বললো, আমি সইতে পারলাম না। আর মানে রঞ্জনকে রাজা মেরে দিল। কিন্তু তার মধ্যে তারপরও যখন রাজা বলছেন যে আমার হাত ধরো, নন্দিনী কিন্তু হাতটা ধরলো, অ্যান্ড শি সেজ দ্যাট আমি বাউনাবা। তারপর সবাই যখন জিজ্ঞেস করছে নন্দিনী কোথায়, ও সবার আগে রাজা কোথায় সেটা আর কেউ জিজ্ঞেস করছে না। মানে সো শি ইজ দ্য লিডার, সো আই থিঙ্ক শি ডেফিনেটলি উইন্স দিস, you know. So
a lot of these intertextual discussions, I mean, these things are, I mean, Draupadi and Nandini, they're coming up a lot. কখনো কখনো এরম ধরনের প্রশ্ন উঠছে, এতখানি আইডিয়াল ক্যারেক্টার কি হয় সম্ভব? তাহলে কি ওই জন্যই কি ওয়েস্টার্ন অডিয়েন্স নিতে পারেনি?
হ্যাঁ, ওরা সিম্বলিক হিসেবে নিয়েছে। এন্ড হ্যাঁ,
look at the king of the dark chamber,
Raja
Sudarshana. And this is possibly intertextual, that's why I mentioned Sudarshana has a lot of erotic lust for the king. Nandini doesn't have that.
No.
The king has that for Nandini. Now, I find this very juxtaposing, because the king itself, the character, has been portrayed by Rabindranath in different ways in poetry or essays or plays. Raja keeps coming back. কখনো সে দুঃখ রাতের রাজা, রবীন্দ্রনাথের যে আগমন কবিতা, সেখানে he's talking about দুঃখ রাতের রাজা। দুঃখ রাতের রাজা, এই রাজা, নন্দিনীর রাজা, রাজার রাজা। হ্যাঁ, শম্ভুমিত্র যখন রাজা ইডিপাস এবং এই রাজা মানে রবীন্দ্রনাথের রাজা অভিনয় হতো, উনি বিজ্ঞাপন করতেন দুটি অন্ধকারের নাটক।
I remember that poster.
হ্যাঁ, মানে এটা আমার কাছে খুব মানে ইভেন ইন থিয়েটার অ্যাডভার্টাইজিং লিটারেচার, এটা আমার কাছে খুব মানে কি বলবো, খুব ইন্টারটেক্সচুয়াল তো বটে এবং খুব ইন্টারপ্রিটেটিভ এই সময় দাঁড়িয়ে। কারণ আমি মানে আমার জেনারেশন রাজা অইডিপাস বা রাজা দেখার সৌভাগ্যই হয়নি, and thanks to our archives we don't have any reference of the play.
So can I now talk about it? 1 minute.
একটু পরে আসবো কি ওটাতে।
আচ্ছা, ওকে।
এই যে তুমি বললে যে রাজা হ্যাজ আ ফিজিক্যাল ডিজায়ার, এই ডিজায়ারটাও কিন্তু খুব কমপ্লেক্স। কারণ যা এক একটা জায়গায় ইউ ফিল ইট ইজ এ সেক্সুয়াল ডিজায়ার। আর
যে ব্যাঙের যে রেফারেন্সটা আছে, যে তোমাকে হাতের মধ্যে ট্র্যাপ করব, হাতের মধ্যে
ভেঙে গুড়িয়ে দেব, ওইটা ইউ ডু ফিল ইট ইজ সেক্সুয়াল হোয়াটএভার। কিন্তু আবার পরে যখন বলে আমি তোমাকে এত প্রশ্রয় দিয়েছি, আবার আরেক জায়গায় বলে বন্ধুর মতন আমার হাতটা ধরো, আমি রিক্ত তপ্ত শূন্য। এই যে তখন মনে হয় নন্দিনীকে একটা কম্প্যানিয়ন হিসেবে
ওইটাই বলছি যে ভালোবাসার যে বহিঃপ্রকাশ, যে তুমিও তো তোমার ওই যে তোমার যে রবীন্দ্রনাথের যে কথাগুলোতে পড়লে, the real expression she finds in love and life.
Yes.
আর cutting it close to what Progya just mentioned, আসলে চরিত্রগুলো, যে দ্রৌপদী, দুজন দ্রৌপদীর কথা তুমি বললে, নাথপতি অনাথপতি দ্রৌপদী তো একদম আলাদা। মানে তিনিও তো দ্রৌপদী, তিনি তো ইরাবতী কাব্যের যুগান্তের দ্রৌপদী। শ্যাম বেনেগল যখন কলিযুগ সিনেমাটা করলেন মহাভারত নিয়ে, তার যে দ্রৌপদী, তার রেফারেন্স অফ দ্রৌপদী, সেখানে দ্রৌপদী কিন্তু আহা বেচারা, দুঃশাসন আমাকে অপমান করেছে বলে আমি চুল বাঁধবো রক্ত দিয়ে, সেই দ্রৌপদী কিন্তু বেচারা না। সব্যসাচী দেবের কৃষ্ণা কবিতায় যে দ্রৌপদী বলছেন যে আমি কামনা করতাম অর্জুনকে, কিন্তু আমাকে স্পর্শ করতো, মানে এই লাইনগুলো, মানে এই কথাগুলো ব্যবহার করছেন বসন্তের প্রমত্ত রজনীতে কিংসুক, মানে এই শব্দ, এই মেটাফার্সগুলো আসছে, which are mostly erotic metaphors. সেখানে একজন নারী তার কামনার কথা বলছেন। দ্রৌপদীর আনফর্চুনেটলি পরে যেসব মানে প্রথম পার্থ, বোধদেব বসুর প্রথম পার্থ, সেখানে দ্রৌপদী এসে কর্ণকে বলে যে আমি তোমার বন্ধু হতে চাই কর্ণ। she has an agenda.
Of course.
আমি তোমার বন্ধু হতে চাই কর্ণ, কারণ ও জানে কর্ণ was hugely attracted to her. নন্দিনীর একটা জায়গায় দ্রৌপদীর থেকে বিরাট ডিফারেন্স। নন্দিনীর ডাইনামিজমটা মোস্টলি বিপ্লব, মোস্টলি ফ্রিডম,
and she's very single
আর
minded in her
খুব
focus.
সিঙ্গল মাইন্ডেড। দ্রৌপদীকে কিন্তু অনেক অনেক ভাবে আমরা দেখি, অনেক বড় ভাবে দেখি।
মানে দ্রৌপদীর ক্যানভাসটাই অনেক
পিটার ব্রুকসের মহাভারত।
একটা part
হ্যাঁ, মানে দ্রৌপদী has to deal with a lot of things.
হ্যাঁ
when you're discussing this, I'm continuously reminded of Gajen Mitra's Panchajanya.
Of course.
আর সেখানে দুটো জিনিস, একটা তো লোকে বলে যে কৃষ্ণ আর দ্রৌপদী is the first example of man-woman just friendship.
Of course.
কৃষ্ণ কিন্তু ভাবছেন যে আমার পাশে যদি ও থাকতো, অর্জুনটা একটা ক্যাবলা, আমার পাশে যদি দ্রৌপদী থাকতো, আমি পৃথিবীর অল টাইম শ্রেষ্ঠ হতাম। এইটা একদিকে। আবার ওই সখা বলছে, সখী বলছে, কিন্তু দ্রৌপদীও কিন্তু বলছে একটা জায়গায় যে সব সময় যখন আমার ওই বছরটা আসে, যখন আমি পার্থর সঙ্গে থাকবো, তখন কিন্তু কৃষ্ণ ম্যানিপুলেট করে আমি পার্থকে সরিয়ে দেয় ওই জায়গায় যেটার জন্য কখনো পাইনি।
সেটা তো একটা সেক্সুয়াল কনকারেন্স আমার মনে হয়, মানে ইট ইজ আ হিউজ political concurrence and a sexual concurrence. Absolutely.
এই যে রাজা নেপথ্যে বলছে, নন্দিনী তুমি কি জানো বিধাতা তোমাকেও রূপের মায়ার আড়ালে অপরূপ করে রেখেছেন, তার মধ্যে থেকে ছিনিয়ে তোমাকে আমার মুঠোর ভেতর পেতে চাচ্ছি, কিছুতেই ধরতে পারছি না। আমি তোমাকে উল্টিয়ে পাল্টিয়ে দেখতে চাই, না পারি তো ভেঙে চুরে ফেলতে চাই। হ্যাঁ, এই যে it is a very erotic expression on the one hand, and
this is violent too.
It's violent.
It's almost violent, that acquiring the male.
For me, it's very toxic alpha male patriarchy that comes out.
কারণ রাজার তখন ডেভেলপমেন্টটা হয়নি, তখন এপিফেনিটা হয়নি, তখন রাজা সবকিছুই জোর দিয়ে কন্ট্রোল করছে, মানে টোটালিটেরিয়ান, সবকিছুই জোর। তার তো কিন্তু তার কিছুক্ষণ পরে রাজার মনোভাবটা এটা এত এত সুন্দর যে and this is a symbol which I like, the powerlessness of power and the magic of power. তো রাজা বলছেন যে আমার মধ্যে কেবল জোরই আছে, রঞ্জনের মধ্যে আছে জাদু। পৃথিবীর নিচের তলার পিণ্ড পিণ্ড পাথর, লোহা, সোনা, সেইখানে রয়েছে জোরের মুক্তি। ওপরের তলার একটুখানি কাঁচা মাটিতে ঘাস উঠছে, ফুল ফুটছে, সেইখানে রয়েছে জাদুর খেলা। দুর্গমের থেকে হিরে আনি, মানিক আনি, সহজের থেকে ওই প্রাণের জাদুটুকু কেড়ে আনতে পারিনি। এইখানে আবার রাজা সেই সেক্সুয়ালিটিটা দেখতেই পাচ্ছি না। হ্যাঁ, এখানে মানে হেল্পলেস, মানে ভেরি ভালনারেবল। আর তারপর
perhaps he understands how small he is in the context of the bigger picture.
He understands it, কিন্তু রাজার পুরো মানে মন্ত্রটাই হচ্ছে আমি জোর দিয়ে সব করবো। আর এটা মানে one of my favorite lines, তোমার মতন একটি ছোট্ট ঘাসের দিকে হাত বাড়িয়ে বলছি, আমি তপ্ত, আমি রিক্ত, আমি ক্লান্ত। তৃষার দাহে এই মরুটা কত উর্বরা ভূমিকে লেখন করে নিয়েছে, তাতে মরুর পরিসরই বাড়ছে। ওই একটুখানি দুর্বল ঘাসের মধ্যে যে প্রাণ আছে তাকে আপন করতে পারছে না। এই যে রাজার সঙ্গে নন্দিনীর যে এই পার্থক্যটা, কিন্তু শেষে যখন হাত বলে তুমি আমার হাত ধরবে, তখন নন্দিনীর কিন্তু একটা জায়গায় বলে যে ভালো লাগে, রাজাকে ভালো লাগে, তার জোরটা ভালো লাগে। তো এইটাই আর কি, মানে রাজা আমার মনে হয় যে নন্দিনীর থেকেও অনেক বেশি জটিল, অনেক বেশি অনেক যেটা বলে লেয়ার্ড, অনেক ভাবের পরিসর আছে আর কি, একটার পর একটা।
আমরা ফিরে আসি আমাদের
হ্যাঁ,
মিস মোক্ষার কাছে, because it's Moksha Talks after all.
No, that's okay.